Ozonics Killerwinds podcast back again. I'm Cole Tanner.
I'm Nick Simon.
We have got a special guest with us today. We're pretty stoked about this. It's kind of been a long time coming trying to get this one all worked out.
Yeah.
We've got a guy named Kip Adams. Kip, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it, man.
Oh, my pleasure, Cole. Nick, good to see you, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Kip, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself. You work with the National Deer Association, and what's your role with the National Deer Association?
Sure. I'm a wildlife biologist, essentially is what I am. My title is Chief Conservation Officer, which is a fancy way of saying that I oversee our conservation program. So all of the educational efforts, all of the materials that we build, the classes that we teach, the research that we're involved in, anything that has to do, from our conservation mission at the National Deer Association, I get to oversee it, have my hand in. So I'm a really, really lucky guy.
Yeah. Do you do that full time? Is that a full time job? Is that your day to day? That's what you do?
That's my day to day job, and I started as a state agency biologist a long time ago. I was a wildlife biologist for the state of Florida. I'm from the north. I always looked at to coming back to the north. I'm from Pennsylvania. I went to grad school at the University of New Hampshire. So after I had been in Florida for a few years, New Hampshire's deer biologist was promoted to their chief of wildlife. So I applied for that job, ended up becoming New Hampshire Fish and Game's deer and bear biologist. And so was living the dream there. It was at that point that I learned about the precursor to NDA, which was the Quality Deer Management Association. Became a member.
Yep.
That was in 1999. And then in 2002, QDMA hired their first biologist in the Northeast. And I said, man, that has my name written all over it. So I have been a full-time biologist for QDMA, which is now the National Deer Association, since 2002. So I can't believe it's been that long, but it's been a great ride.
Yeah, that's funny.
Awesome.
Yeah, the early 2000s, I can always remember where I was because I graduated in 2003.
Yeah.
So whenever it's 2002, 2004, 2001, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I know just about how long ago that is.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's wild. It's kind of crazy to think about how far, and we could probably go down a rabbit hole just even of how far deer biology has come in the last 20, 25 years. Like when you're talking about like QDMA first hiring biologists and first getting into that. And now there's universities that have departments that with this type of thing. There's lots of young people getting into this type of field.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's far more opportunities today in the wildlife field than ever before. When I was in school, essentially you go to work for a state agency or a federal agency, and that was about it. But today, look at all of the wildlife consultants that we have, and the land managers, and just so many more opportunities for people interested in wildlife. So, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's kind of neat to think because like it used to be, like you said, just state and federal level, and now there's really like a whole private sector. And like the National Deer Association, are you guys considered a nonprofit? Like, is that like Pheasants Forever or Ducks Unlimited? So it's not really, would you guys consider yourself private sector or nonprofit?
We're a nonprofit. So we're a 501c3 nonprofit
Got it.
wildlife conservation organization. Yep. So we're cool. One of the NGOs.
Yep. Got it. That makes sense.
Cool.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, ever since we had that Jace Elliott on, it's just really interesting to just think about all those people out there that are doing that type of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, because we think about it from the perspective of just a hunter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think about a deer as, a critter that I'm looking to try to harvest. They look at a deer as a resource, right?
Yeah. Yep.
They kind of have a whole different perspective.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. And more of not only just as like me thinking of it as a hunter, but them thinking of it as a, from a conservation perspective, a biology perspective. It's kind of interesting.
Yep.
But yeah, Kip, the reason that we wanted to have you on today is we really want to dive into, I'm just really interested to kind of see where the conversation goes about deer's senses, their sense of smell, their sense of sight. Those are obviously the two big ones that I think every hunter thinks about and really has had experiences with, good and probably more bad.
Yeah.
I know for me as like this podcast came about, I felt like over the years I've heard things along the way, and I've done my own research and read articles and seen things and heard people talk about it, and then had my own experiences. But I'm really excited to just kind of go through some of this stuff with you. And that's kind of the idea of what we want to talk about today, if that's cool.
I think that sounds great.
All right. So let's just jump right in. So we talk about a deer's, let's just go right into deer's sense of smell.
Yep.
When it comes right down to it, you know, I feel like one of the things that I saw as I read it, as I looked into the research, is like a lot of stuff I saw was like, there's some stuff we know, but there's some stuff we don't know. You know, like there's only so much research you can do about a deer's nose. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like a deer's eyes, you can do eye tests and you can try to figure out how many cones and rods and bop. Do you feel like there is still a lot of unknown about a deer's sense of smell?
There is, and and from a hunting end, and I'm a lifelong hunter, and I have always taken all the things that I can learn from the research, and apply that personally from a hunting end. But then that's also helped me from an educational end as I talk to people or teach people, because I can think about it as a hunter, and I know this, how hunters can use this information. So, starting with a sense of smell, there's really three senses that really impact hunter opportunities, and that being a sense of smell and sight, like you said, but the sense of hearing as well. That definitely plays into that. The University of Georgia has done more research on senses than any other place on the planet. This started with Dr. Carl Miller, who is a legend in the deer research world. He has more published information on deer than any other person on the planet. He has now retired, and following in his footsteps is Dr. Gino D'Angelo. Kind of an interesting side note, both of those guys are Pennsylvania guys. So both Pennsylvania natives that ended up in Georgia. So
you guys have had D'Angelo on one of your podcasts talking about senses, deer senses. I think I found just
absolutely
doing the Google searching. And
so
digging
Gino
down
has been on, and Carl has spoke literally hundreds of times for us over the years at deer steward classes and meetings and seminars, etc. So we're very lucky to have a good relationship with them, and literally insider information in many cases, relative to the research that they're doing, and what that is showing.
You're right. So just kind of dive in. What is the inside information? Where are they at right now on the cutting edge of the research when it comes to sense of smell? Is it the olfactory sensors? Is it, what is it? Like, what is it? Where are they at when it comes to that?
Well, with that one, people love to say deer can smell X times better than a human, or, X times better than a bloodhound. The reality of it is, you don't know exactly. So if anybody gives you, it's exactly, 100 times better or 1,000 or 10,000 times better, they're making up a number, because literally the researchers do not know. What they do know, though, is most people look at a deer, and you can look at one of these on the wall behind me, that little black thing at the end of their face. They think of that as being their nose, because it's kind of like it on us. Like almost all of our olfactory sensors are right here, just in our nose. Very, very different with a deer. And essentially their nose starts at the end of their face, where, what we see is that black thing. And it runs all the way up that long face, all the way to the brain. And in that channel, it has all kinds of reverberations back and forth. All of that increases surface matter to just provide additional cells, nerve cells, sensory cells, to be able to take in even more senses. So what we do know is that, is it 100 times better than us? Probably way more than that. Is it 100,000 times better? That's probably more in the neighborhood. We don't know exactly, but we do know that they are really, really advanced relative to what they can smell, and that is their number one sense that they use to avoid predation. To the point where even if you take a pile of acorns, not all of those are going to be good inside. Some of those inside will have worms in them, or just will be rotting. If you take that pile of acorns and dump it, those deer choose those acorns they want to eat by smell, not by sight. And when you get all done, if they eat them all and they leave a certain number there, the ones that they leave are the ones that are wormy, rotten, etc. The ones that aren't good. They didn't tell that by looking at it. They didn't tell it by picking up and feeling. They can tell that by smell. So their sense of smell is incredibly complex. And it's partly just because the length of that nasal channel that they have just has so many sensory opportunities. So if a deer's face was half as long as it is now, their sense of smell would not be nearly as good because you don't have as much area for all those sensory cells. So their sense of smell is incredibly complex and way more advanced than their sense of sight or their sense of hearing.
Right, right. Yeah, like you said, you mentioned that professor, Dr. Miller, talking about some of his research. There was a couple different articles that I saw with like North American Whitetail. Again, he has got a lot of stuff out there. I mean, you can find quotes from him all over the place. It's really, really insane. And again, that's where my understanding gravitates to is just like I think a lot of people, well, how much better is it than ours?
Yeah.
How much bigger is it than ours? You know, they talk about the olfactory sensor, the olfactory bulb. Well, how much bigger is it than in humans? Ba, 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 ba. But one of the things that I thought that was really interesting, you know, you're talking about that nasal canal and how they smell things. And then obviously that sense of smell is connected to their brain.
Yeah.
You follow me? And there's been a lot of research done about these neurological pathways and what parts of the brain are interpreting this information, right? And I could read a paragraph of super complicated talks about this limbic system and blah, 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 blah. But the gist of it boils down to is what a lot of this research is suggesting is that a deer's nose is directly connected to the parts of the brain controlling memory, learning, and self-preservation reflexes.
Yeah.
Right. So just like we know deer, it's a fight or flight, they flight, right? They're going to get out of there. Interestingly, one of the parts I thought was kind of cool too, is it talked about this Proust phenomenon in human beings and about how basically what that does is that it's a study that it's associating our sense of smell with memories.
Yeah.
You know, they say your sense of smell is one of the things that bring back like involuntary memories of things that you recall from your past. Like in the Midwest, I'm a dirt track guy, man. I love going to dirt track races in the summertime. Man, when I go to dirt track race, first race of the year, when I smell that fuel and walking through the pits, it just instantly it makes me think of when I was a little kid going with my grandpa to dirt track races, right?
Yeah.
Like I just instantly am back there. And they say that deer have that same sort of, perspective when they talk about a yearling versus a 5, 6, 7-year-old buck. And you can think about odor like a scent experience. You follow me? And they smell this stuff and they remember. You remember?
Right.
Does that make sense? Almost like a smell library.
Yeah.
Do you follow me? And so when you hear people say, oh, well, a mature buck, like that's an entirely different animal. No, it really is, right? Like they use those smells and it compounds their ability to learn and to stay out of danger.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Like that's just insane when you really start thinking about that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Can you expand on any of that? I mean, am I on the right track there? What can you tell me about when they talk about the correlation and what parts of the brain and how they react? I mean, do you know much? Have you heard much about that on your side of things?
Yeah, and it's certainly, that stuff that's controlling behavior is very important. One, to stay alive, two, to be able to feed, and three, to have an opportunity to breed, during the rut.
Yeah.
Additional research at the University of Georgia looking at some of the different glands on deer. Tarsal gland being the most important, on the inside of the back leg.
Yep.
Arguably the second most important is the forehead gland. And the forehead gland, particularly in mature bucks, has a lot of increased glandular activity during the rut. And this is why in older bucks, often the forehead will turn a reddish color or that hair will get wavy. Mm-hmm. It's because of increased activity in that gland. And Georgia researchers have identified almost 50 different pieces of information that deer can expel about themselves through that gland.
Crazy.
Now, we don't know what all of those are, but they can identify, from these scent compounds, it's like 47 or 48 very specific, distinct things. Now, we believe that these are things like, personal identity, physical maturity, all of these different things. We don't know exactly what deer are detecting from them, but we know they are there, different items to be detected, and assume, deer are able to determine all of these different things about these different animals.
Right.
This is one of the reasons why bucks rub on trees. It's not just to get rid of the velvet. They are tearing that cambium layer. That's a visual thing. Releases aromatics from the tree. Deer smell that to want to come there. And then they rub their forehead gland on it. That's like, me leaving my business card there. Hey, I'm Kip Adams. I'm used to have red hair. It's white now. I'm 6 feet tall. I'm in the area. Leaving all this information, and that's why so many different bucks come to these rubs, scrapes, etc., to be able to collect this information. So we don't know exactly how many of those 47 or 48 different pieces mean something to deer.
Yeah.
But given that they still do that today, and through the evolution, they're getting rid of stuff that they don't need, keeping stuff they use.
Right.
So it's highly likely, that they are able to make sense of all of that different all those pieces of information, that they have. So just one more evidence of just how complex that their olfactory system is, being able to parse through all of those different things. One, to have the ability to leave those there,
Right.
and then two, the ability to go in and detect all of that and be able to learn from that.
Right.
So just one more reason that whitetails are just one of the coolest things in the world.
Yeah, no kidding.
I know, that's the thing I told you before we started today. I'm like, it's exciting and it's discouraging.
Yeah.
It just makes you have such a unbelievable level of respect for
Oh man.
how they are and how they can survive. And it's hence why you can find whitetails in so many different places.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they have quite the arsenal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Isn't there something about too how when you talk about those tarsal glands and leaving those marks on, like obviously when they're scraping and rubbing and doing all that stuff, isn't there, like on some of the research that I was doing, some really, really older articles that was like, I found one that was like an encyclopedia that somebody like copied all these papers from, encyclopedia, and it was not talking about just whitetails, roe deer and Sitka deer and all these other types of deer too, but don't they have like, it's some sort of gland or something in their throat that when they breathe it in, it can like, that helps them identify, like if it's a doe and estrus, right? When they're going up and they're nudging a doe, that they breathe that in, and then it's something. I'm going to murder it. Am I on the right track there?
You're close. You're very close.
And it's got
Not
a
in
crazy
the
name,
throat,
right? The name of it, it's kind of hard to pronounce. Like I don't even know how you say it.
It's at the top of their mouth, at the very front, and it's a little diamond-shaped organ. It's called the vomeronasal nasal organ.
There you go.
And what hunters mistakenly think, this is when you see bucks lip curl, or that flamen, that's the German word for lip curl. Hunters mistakenly, and I'm going to say even mistakenly because this is not true, they think that's how a buck tells if a doe is in heat.
Okay.
That is not true. And the reason I say that is because what they're actually doing is when they lip curl, they're taking either urine or the aerosols around urine into their mouth. So that's the lip curl part exposes that organ. The urine or the aerosols get in there, and then that has a pathway right to the brain.
Yeah, like
and the reason I say this is not how they can tell if a doe is in heat is because it goes to a part of the brain that does not control behavior.
Interesting.
So it's not, so even, if they were telling if a doe is in heat, it's not helping them any because that doesn't, the part that goes to the brain, what it does is it helps keep their body in breeding readiness. So that whole vomeronasal nasal organ, the lip curl, all of that essentially is like a buck taking a daily Viagra. The brain detects that, and then it helps keep him in breeding condition at the appropriate time of the year. So he tells if that doe is in heat by secretions on her body, her vaginal secretions. And when she stands and doesn't run, that's when she's in heat. It's not the urine. Because think about it. If the urine is when she was in heat, what do does do? They urinate and they run away.
Right.
And essentially, it's trying to get a buck off, stop harassing them before they are ready to stand.
Yeah.
So if the urine was how bucks could tell, the does wouldn't run away then. They would stand there. But it's the urinate, leave. But the buck will then smell that, lip curl, pump it in the vomeronasal nasal organ, go to the body, keeps him ready to breed. But the next time you look in a deer's mouth, it's very prominent. Right at the top, all the way at the front, you'll see a little diamond-shaped organ right on top. So it's real easy to see.
And they say like that, it opens and then like that scent or that molecule will go inside and then it closes and then like the blood in its roof of its mouth like covers that and then obviously goes right into their nervous system and boom, and says what it needs to say.
Wow.
And then it opens back up, I guess, and then it's ready to breathe that again. And I read some stuff about how like you're talking about identifying, like they say, again, a lot of it is, I mean, there's just so much of it that just feels like there's just so much uncharted territory here,
yeah.
but that they could identify an exact certain deer, okay, that's that buck or that's this doe, or, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's really, really interesting stuff.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And that's
ahead.
also why when you talk about the identity, during the pre-rut, how bucks are sparring,
Right.
they're not fighting, they're just sparring. They're pushing each other a little bit. What does the loser always do? He always licks the forehead gland of the guy who's bigger or more dominant. They will lick it, they'll smell it, they'll lick it some more. Essentially, he is figuring out exactly, okay, you are ahead of me on the pecking order. I need to remember you, whether by, smelling you here or when you're rubbing a tree, to know you're in the area. Because bucks don't want to fight during the rut.
Right.
You stand a chance of getting hurt or killed, so they develop that pecking order just like dogs, chickens, kids on the playground, or anybody else,
Yep.
so that they know where they belong. And they, you and I are a visual species. If we have we'll push each other around a little bit or wrestling match and say, all right, yep, Cole's tougher than me. I can see you. I would remember that. Deer aren't visual like that. Deer are, by sense of smell. So they would tell, okay, ooh, I can smell this buck because I'm in the field with him, or I see, he left information at a scrape or a rub. They smell and be like, oh yeah, that guy's ahead of me on the pecking order. Or, you know what? He's below me. I'm going to go let him know it's time to get out of town. So that's one of the ways, that during the year they figure all of that stuff out. And it's through, scents on their glands, scents they leave behind, but then just that really complex sense of olfactory system that allows it all to work.
Right. Is it accurate to say a lot of the stuff that I was reading that they say that roughly a deer has 297 million olfactory sensors compared to a human that has like 5 million? And then the olfactory bulb, a lot of the stuff that I was reading said it was at least twice as big as humans. You know what I mean? When it comes right down to it, it's pretty crazy to think about.
They certainly have way more capacity to smell than we do.
Right.
And so, it's one of those deals, where people say, man, if you had a superpower, what would it be? I'd say, man, I wish I could smell like a deer. That would be mine. Think about how much more of an effective hunter you could be if you could smell like a deer.
Yeah.
If you knew what was in the area, knew what was coming, downwind or down thermal, or, think of all the times that you've blood trailed a deer during archery season and lose the trail for a little bit. Think if you could just smell what was ahead of you the next few hundred yards. How much nicer it would be to pick up a trail. That'd be awesome.
Oh yeah. Well, and I tell you what, we're as we're talking about this, the thing that kind of comes to mind for me now, and before we started today was, and I did read a couple things that kind of talked about this a little bit, but was talking about the curiosity of a deer because of their such an acute sense of smell. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like I said, when I first started hunting, that was the big thing, right? You used to, it's the guys do it still now. It doesn't seem like it's as, maybe it's just not as talked about, but like drag lines, walking with a drag line.
Yep.
But just how acute their sense of smell is and how you could, again, like how can you use that to your advantage?
Yeah.
And some of the stuff that I was reading, and it kind of made me think, is like, well, can that acute sense and just almost the curiosity that can come from that, how could you use that kind of against them? Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
But well, I'll tell you what, that's a lot.
Super cool stuff. It's awesome.
Is there anything else just right off the top when it comes to their sense of smell that is just kind of like mind blowing, that when you heard, like, just for listeners is there anything that we haven't covered that just really comes to mind when it comes to their sense of smell that kind of blows you away?
I think that from a hunting standpoint, one of the important things to realize with it is, it's really, really good, their sense of smell. So it's not like we're going to change that in many cases, but there are certainly things that we can do as hunters, to help us. And I think understanding, certainly the wind is a big thing, but understanding thermals is extremely important. understanding scent control and what we can do, to help reduce the amount of scent that we have. All of those things play in a lot. And, we can never completely, get rid of all of our scent. We're producing scent all the time, but there's
Right.
absolutely things we can do, to help cover it and help mask it and put ourselves in better positions. So I think all of that starts with just an understanding of just how good a deer's sense of smell is. And then from that, be able to figure out, hey, this is what works best for me or what I most want to do, as a hunter, to give myself the best chance to get close.
Gotcha. Absolutely. I mean, that hits right on the head with when we talk about ozonics, right? Like we have so many people that walk up and want to just talk about, well, tell me how ozonics works. And the first thing I always go to is we could talk about ozonics all day long, but let's talk about the fundamentals of what ozone does and doesn't do. Let's get that figured out. If we can walk you through, these are the things, and if you understand these, it can make using the ozonics a lot more effective and a lot better. Because inherently, if you don't know the fundamentals, then you're just kind of stepping off in the wrong direction a bit.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. The one of the things that I thought that it was really interesting, just that you mentioned there, talking about scent. There's a biologist, Dr. Brunson Strickland, Mississippi State University, talked about trying to identify scent, and they started calling it volatile organic compounds, VOC. Have you seen much research from the University of Georgia? I know obviously they're really concentrating on the deer side of things. Have they done much stuff about talking about just really identifying human scent? Has there been much done at Georgia about that?
Not a whole bunch. And I think as much as I think Georgia is doing what they can to learn about, the system in deer, like how they smell, and all of that. So I'm not as much on the human side of that.
Yep.
Certainly Mississippi State, who has a tremendous deer lab there. I could say something bad about Bronson. I won't. But Bronson is a good friend of mine. Bronson is a really good friend of mine.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Great deer researcher. The thing that I like a lot about what they do too is that so much of their research is very applied research. In that theoretical research is great, you need that, but I'm a big fan of the applied research stuff that
Yes.
when they get done, I can take that as a hunter or as a land manager or whatever and use that to my advantage. And
I agree.
Mississippi State has always been really good with that, whether it's, the deer movement stuff that they do or, bedding areas and identifying those, or, in this case, some of the VOC work that Bronson's doing.
Yeah.
So top
Yeah.
notch for sure.
Oh yeah, and I'm right there with you. I like the tangible, I can touch stuff.
Yeah.
All the theoretical stuff is awesome too, and it may be this, it may be that, but it's something that I can really apply.
Right.
But yeah, it was interesting, looking into this volatile organic compounds, this VOC, basically substances, organic compounds that could come from the human. I'll just mention this quickly. It was really interesting that there was one study that said they found over 1,800 distinct VOCs that were determined from a human body. Just right off the bat.
Jeez.
But the thing that blew me away about that the most, so they had a few categories, and I'll say them in no particular order. Face, breath, skin, hair, saliva, blood, feces, not face, sorry, feces, farting basically. But the number one, which I was like, I actually asked you before and you guessed it, but the number one was breath.
Yeah.
872 VOCs of the 1,800 were from breath. Skin and hair, 532. Feces, 381. Saliva, 359. They had milk on there, 256. Blood, 154.
Jeez.
So, and I've said that a lot. I mean, I actually years and years ago I was a cameraman, and we got to do a lot of stuff with predator hunting using thermal cameras. And I'll tell you what, you don't realize how much you are, and I've said this before, we are a human exhaust pipe.
Yeah.
I mean, it is really insane when you see a thermal camera and you're like, man, that just never stops, does it?
Yeah.
You're just constantly, dude.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us just don't think about that.
Right.
Do you follow me?
Yeah.
And seeing that, and of that 1,800, 800 some are your breath.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild to think about. And that also, they were very specific to specify that's not, bacteria. This is just from the human body. That's not on your clothes.
Right.
That's not everything else that's happening.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It really, when you look at it that way, you're like, dang, you know, and that's why you get winded by deer.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like it's, it seems pretty cut and dry there.
Yeah. Yep.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, that's not the gas on your pants from filling up, the side by side of your truck on the way hunting or any
I
of that.
know. I heard that said one time about that. Like, it was just like a year ago. Somebody made that comment that like gas stations are the enemy of every bow hunter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'll never forget when I first started using ozonics as a videographer and being with hunters, and we saw ozonics work, and we were on a guided deer hunt in Kansas, and the guy I was with was driving, and he pulled into his gas station. The outfitter had this terrible look on his face. He's like, "What are you guys doing?" Like, "Oh, we're going inside to get some food." He's like, "You're stopping at a gas station?" He couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe that we would stop.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, it's just funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh. All right, so let's move on to, I say we move on to their sense of sight.
Yeah.
Could you talk to me just a little bit about, obviously, deer can see better in low light. Why is that they can see better in low light? If you can kind of extrapolate on that a little bit.
Sure. And this research has also been done at the University of Georgia. At the first time, probably 15 or 20 years ago now. And they have done some more, a lot more recent stuff and taken that to a whole new level. So we know a lot about how deer see. Essentially, deer are red-green colorblind. What we think of that way. So, they see colors, they just see them differently than we do. They see really good into the blue wavelengths.
Yep.
So anything that's red, that essentially looks green to them. Fluorescent orange doesn't look anything different than green to them. So, from a hunting end, we don't need to worry about wearing orange and scaring deer.
Yep.
So it's the movement, that their eyesight is so good at. So from the research, we know they don't necessarily see orange. They see really good into the blues. So the two colors that they see best, they see yellow really, really well. And they see blue really well. And it almost shines like a beacon. So, the funny thing is people will complain about wearing fluorescent orange, but yet they'll go hunting wearing a pair of blue jeans.
Yeah.
And, that's just like a big beacon.
Yeah.
Look at me. Look at me.
I know every time I see a blue string, I just cringe, or blue fletchings. I'm just like, oh, you know what I mean? Like I just like, oh man, or like a bright yellow string. I'm like, oh man.
Yeah.
There's a great story about Fred Bear way back in the day when in a new series of bows they were making. It was notes where he had gone into the shop as they were looking, and they were experimenting with some different colors. And this was way before we knew what deer could see or not. But he had notes where he didn't like the blue coloration in one of their recurves. So he had to get rid of, and it wasn't all blue, it just had blue. So I've laughed over this. Like Fred was way ahead of his time for so many things, and even vision by deer, he was ahead. No blue.
Yeah,
so,
that's cool.
That's
so they see blue and yellow really good. So no blue or yellow. But your question relative to the low light, that's because they see so good into the blue wavelengths.
Yes. Because
that gives them the absolute best opportunity to have an advantage over all the other things out there in those crepuscular times. Meaning right after dawn, right at dusk. That's why they are most active then, because the way they see works really, really good then. And it's also so much better than everything else that's around them at those times.
Yeah.
So it plays perfectly into what they can see. That also means that along those, they see white really good. And, we talk about whitetail deer, and people say, yeah, because their tail is white, but it's way more than that. If you actually flip a deer's tail up, the whole underside is white, but the deer's whole rump is white and their whole belly is white. The reason for that, it has all to do with how they see and how they avoid predators. Because think about it, if a deer is by itself and you spook it, he or she may flag, may not. In many cases, if they're by themselves, they don't flag, they're not. But if they're in a group of deer, they almost always are flagging.
Yeah.
And essentially what they're doing is they often escape to cover. So because they can see so good in low light in those white colors, their underside of the tail, their butt, and their belly are basically like a big spotlight. Follow me. Follow. So as they're running away, that tail up shine, their eyes pick that up so well. And it's the simplest way to follow whoever's in front of you through heavy cover and darkness until you get to security. So
Interesting.
that plays in perfectly with how they can see. And, those whites and blues like that and yellow, which means, or that explains why they're so active at dawn and dusk. That also explains from our end, from a camouflage perspective, it's not always just the pattern that works so well for us. So many of our modern camouflage garments today, it's how they're built that either makes them work or not. Meaning, so many of them are built starting with a white piece of garment. The camouflage is applied over top of it, which means that a deer can often still detect that white through that. So that camouflage is very different from a piece of camouflage that does not start as a white garment, that starts as, something a different color. So that light that comes out of it, just as you're referencing the thermal, image while you're hunting, you can see what's going on around us. Look at something under a UV light as you're looking at clothing. You often can see anything that has a white base is highlighted. Deer's eyes are picking up the same thing.
Well, and it's interesting you say that. And we actually had the guys on from Code of Silence, the apparel company. They make camo. And I kind of joked about how back in the day, before all just how advanced these trail cameras have got, I remember walking by my trail cameras and then looking at the photos, and I'd pull the cards and I'd have camo on and it would look white.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even see the camo. And I'm like, I remember like calling my buddies. I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, how is that possible? Like, how is that possible? And again, just because I am how I am, I just started Googling it, and here come find out it's because a lot of these garments are built on a white base, and that's what's showing through with just like the infrared and everything else that's coming through the camera. It's the white. You don't see the camo at all. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it's just really, really bizarre.
Crazy.
Well, you talk about how, again, research from University of Georgia, Mississippi State, in this North American Whitetail article, talking about how studies have shown that a deer has 18 times greater ability to see at night than we do.
Crazy.
18 times. So if you're in a stand and it's dark and you think there's a deer there and you're trying to hold it still, he's probably looking right at you. Because I just think if you could see 18 times better, that's just insane.
Crazy.
That is a lot.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is if you look at our eye, how our eye is built, our pupil is round.
Right.
That lets a certain amount of light in. A deer's pupil is long and thin. So that lets a lot more light in than ours. So immediately they can see better in low light. Then they have what's called a tapetum, which is a layer on the back of their eye. So, if you shine a spotlight on a dog or a deer, it shines.
Yep.
What that tapetum does, and we don't have this. Light comes into our eye, boom, that's it. On a deer, light comes into the eye, through it, and they process it. It hits that tapetum on the back, goes back across the eye. Right. They use it again. Twice. So they get double use of all the light. That's what makes it shine. No, it's that actually coming back. Right. So they have a long, thin pupil to pull in more light, and they double use it. So that's hence the numbers you were just talking about there, why they can see so much better in those low light situations. They just collect more and make way better use of the light.
Right.
So because of that, and what you said is exactly right, Cole, don't be moving. From a color end, we actually see, better than deer in many cases. It's not the color so much, it's the movement. Right. Those long, thin pupils, and they have very little visual acuity. Like as I look at you guys on the screen, I am looking right at you. I can see your nose or your finger. A hawk has a lot of visual acuity. Deer have very low visual acuity. That's why they are often bobbing, moving their head. They're getting another angle at what they're looking at. So their eyes are detected to see any type of movement in about 300 degrees around them. So then they can look at it. They can't really cue in on and see exactly what it is. Hence, they're using their sense of smell to figure it out or moving their head to get another angle. So they are totally built to detect movement. And man, whether their head is up or down, they are super at detecting movement. So that's how, because they're a prey species, that's what they're designed to do. And their eyes are really, really good at that.
Yeah. When you talk about the degree, and again, it was funny. I don't think my grandpa knew this, but a deer sees, like I said, about 310 degrees around him. So there's only like a 50-degree blind spot.
Yeah.
My grandpa taught me when I was a kid, try to draw when they're quartering away.
Yeah.
Well, where's the blind spot?
Yeah, exactly.
When a deer is quartering away,
Yeah.
there's that 50-degree window where
Right.
you could wave your hand in the air. And if they're just looking a steady direction, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They move, they go 20 degrees this way, and all of a sudden they cut that in half. But you know what I'm saying? That's why that quartering away can be such a great opportunity to draw.
Yeah.
Because you can get yourself in that little bit of a blind spot.
Yeah,
I
without
think a
a doubt.
lot of people don't even know or think
Yeah.
about that ever.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, you talk about, their acuity and low light as well. And again, just I'm a fact guy. So
Yeah.
Nick knows this. I love my facts.
Loves facts.
We also, you talk about how humans see in red, green, blue, right?
Yep.
That's just, and if you've ever ran a video camera, you'll see that red, green, blue. Deer don't see all the colors like we do, right? But again, blues is where they really, really shine. When you talk about their blues, and interestingly, not only just do they see blues better, but in low light, the ambient light of what's out there of the blues, reds, and greens,
Yeah.
at low light, blues are 2 to 3 times more than the reds and the greens.
Crazy.
So not only do they see blue better, but
Blues
blue
just
is
show up better.
yeah. Well, and dude, think about it. Like when you go out there and you sit and it's right at dark, all of a sudden you're like, man, I just can't pick up that. I just can't figure out where the sky starts and the green field stops.
Yeah.
I can't pick out the difference between where the tree line is and where the field is. Well, that's because all of a sudden those greens and reds just go away.
Yeah.
And that blue is just that much more there.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so it's like a deer can not only see the blue better, even when you talk about like the way that blue is in their pupil, it's better than ours. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So it's
yeah.
like, it's on steroids.
Yeah.
Hence
Yep.
why they can see so good in low light. Hence
Right.
why they like to move in low light.
Yeah.
Because they can see really good.
Yeah. Yep.
It's really, really interesting
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
They're actually studying a bunch of patterns right now too, doing some studies relative to, hey, what camo patterns work better?
Yeah.
At the University of Georgia's research facility, where they built these machines.
Is it sponsored by Sika? No, I'm just kidding.
Actually, it is. Sika has sponsored a bunch of this work.
Isn't that like a little bit of conflict of interest? I would think. I'm sorry.
It's all about academic integrity.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Where they built this machine where to detect exactly what deer are seeing, and if they make a right choice, the thing opens up and they get a treat. So they teach the deer to make the right choice as much as possible so they get a
Interesting.
treat. Then they have machines like screens up top that are showing different images and all kinds of stuff. And through that, they're able to figure out exactly what deer can see, different patterns, all this kind of stuff, which is pretty cool. And and then from that, not only do they do the studies of the eyes, but then they do actual behavioral stuff with the deer to test all of that, which is pretty wild.
So that research is ongoing. So the idea is trying to figure out which camo pattern they see the least, basically.
Essentially, they're not necessarily studying just different camo patterns. They're studying shapes. Like, okay, so do bigger shaped different colors like the old Army camo? Can deer see that more or less than newer like digital camo type stuff?
Yeah.
So they're studying different things like that.
Interesting.
And to have a better understanding of exactly what deer can see and differentiate.
Interesting.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that would be really, really interesting to see.
Yeah.
That type of information.
Oh, yeah.
Because we were talking about this, and this is going on down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Is camo for the deer? Is it for the person? And I don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels like it's for the person. Like I go to Alaska every year, and I go up there, and I've really gotten to be where now I wear a lot of solids. I just wear solid colors.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I just bought a rain jacket. And it's black. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it's really, really interesting. is it for the deer or is it for us? Maybe it's a combination of both.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
But and then like you said, there's guys like Fred Bear back in the day that were plaid and we're just fine.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and I'd say like when you talk about even like Sitka, years and years ago, and I think Kuyu put out some stuff about the same thing about the idea behind their camo pattern. And if you look at like a leopard, and they've got the bigger spots and the smaller spots, and how when a leopard stands in different types of cover, how those different patterns help them.
Yeah.
A snow leopard is the same way.
Yeah.
Snow leopard has got bigger patterns, but then it also has little black dots, and they show a snow leopard in rocks and then in this other type of cover, and it blends in and it looks like it's not even there, but it's the exact same leopard both times.
Yeah.
And so there's got to be something to it.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
like you said, there's so much like deer haven't evolved and all these animals haven't evolved with these types of camos for no reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So there's got to be something to it.
Yeah. Right.
But
Particularly whitetails, estimated whitetails are over 4 million years old. They are way older than all the other deer species.
Right.
Way, way older. So, they've had a lot of time to get things right and to get really, really good from a sense of smell and vision and hearing standpoint.
yeah. Yeah, no, and that's like you said. I mean, yeah, it's really interesting. Like I said, and I think that's why we've all, maybe not everybody's been, but the way I was taught, when in doubt, hold still.
Yeah.
Even like my little boy, Jet, he's what? He's 7. And, what do I tell him? Okay, Jetty, here's what we got to do, buddy. We got to be really quiet and we got to be really still.
Yeah.
He knows it. You can always tell when he sees something because he instantly, I feel like his hands are always in a weird position because he's like, oh, he just tries to not move,
Yeah.
I'm like, what's up, Jetty? He's like, I see a deer.
Yeah.
I can't move. I'm like, okay, that's good. Good job. Sometimes I have to be like, boy, I'm grabbing my bow and I'm jumping around. Along the same lines, Kip, when it comes to their eyesight, is there anything else that we're missing there when it comes to their eyesight that you think people would really like to hear when it comes to their eyesight? Is there anything else that you can think of that we didn't cover on that piece?
I don't think so with that one. I think the take homes from eyesight are one, just understanding how good they see in those low light situations and that the movement above all else trumps it for them. So, you can be out there in a blue leisure suit if you want, and if you're staying still when you should, and they're not smelling you, you can kill deer.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
Don't move.
Absolutely.
Just understand it's the movement part more than anything else that really impacts it from the vision end.
Yeah.
Right. So let's jump into a little bit about hearing as well.
Yeah.
Again, maybe this seems like super captain obvious, and obviously if you've been deer hunting, you've seen a deer do this, but one of the things right off the bat is obviously deer can move their ears independently.
Yeah.
Think about their ears like little satellite dishes, right? You can have one pointed this way and you can have one pointed this way, and they can really hone in. But Kip, if you could talk, and correct me if I'm wrong, but deer can hear like independently out of each ear too, right? Like where they can just like hear, I don't even know how to say this, but like some of the research I was reading was that they can hear like specifically just like one thing out of one ear and one thing out of the other. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like differently. Is there truth to that?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
I'm not saying that's not true. I haven't heard that.
Okay.
Again, most of the research on hearing also comes from the University of Georgia. And most people are surprised to find that deer actually hear very similarly to the way that we do. So if you take a look, a human ear test, the range of sounds that we're able to hear is almost identical to a deer's.
When you talk about like the decibel level or the
Exactly.
Yep.
Low frequency, the
frequencies.
lower end that we hear up to the upper end,
Yep.
the range that we hear in almost mirrors a deer's perfectly. Deer hear a little better in the lower frequencies, but not much different. It's almost identical to ours. However, they use that sound a lot better than we do. One of the reasons, which you just mentioned, they have those great big ears that they can move to funnel sound. I'm sure you guys have done this before,
Oh, yeah.
just to try to direct more sound in. Deer do that all the time, and one can be forward and one can be back. So they can move their ears independently to funnel sound, I'm not sure that they can hear different things in different ears. I think they're hearing kind of like we do relative to that's the sound, let's understand what it is. But they can move those ears independently to pull in more sound, to get to their eardrums.
Right. Yeah.
So that is one way they absolutely use that better. Another way is they are just so more in tuned to what they're hearing. So think about all the sounds we hear as we go through, a day, and some of the stuff we're paying attention to, some is just noise, we're hearing in the background. None of it is just noise to deer. They are listening, cueing in, to everything, and I liken it as say, your truck on the way home tonight, even if you have the radio up and you're listening and your truck makes a weird noise, your wife or girlfriend wouldn't hear that in a million years, but you can hear it. Like, like, ooh, that didn't sound right. That's exactly what happens with a deer every day in the woods. You or I are walking through, or, an arrow falls off our wrist and hits our tree stand or whatever. Deer are so attuned at that noise is not normal. Mm-hmm. That's why they can sit there and not even pay attention as a squirrel scurries all around, making noise like crazy. But then as soon as you shuffle a little bit, they lock on like, they know that sound is not normal. That's where deer, even though they're not hearing necessarily differently than us, they use it so much better, much better than we do.
Right. Yeah. I don't know why, but I always remember years and years ago, it was just like when I was a younger guy, saw a hunting video and they were giving an example of, it was talking about just a deer's sense of, hearing. Yeah. And a guy was standing up out of a tree stand and he stood up and it was a seat that would go up and down. He was trying to be as careful as he could. He was leaning, trying to get the seat to just kick back, and he leaned too far forward and the seat it was only a couple inches and it just went boom, and it made just a little noise. And that buck, boom, picked his head up and and they were like, well, that's that. And he was gaudy. I mean, literally they had a second angle so you could see this platform seat just like dink. Yeah. And that deer just came unglued. It was like, that's not right. What was that over there? I'm gone. Yeah. And we've all experienced that. Oh yeah. That you just shuffle your feet just that little bit wrong and they're just like, see you later. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty wild. Yep. Yeah, that's wild stuff.
Carl Miller, the guy we talked about earlier, who's retired from the University of Georgia, that did a bunch of this early research. Carl's a great hunter, and Carl used to do a lot of still hunting where, he would just walk very slowly through the woods, and way slower than most people recognize you need to for that. Yes. And he was very, very successful. Partly because, he was good and but partly because he would carry a walking stick and would break up the cadence of his feet with a stick. And he was convinced by doing that, like he never sounded like a human walking. He didn't sound like you walking or me walking, even if we're being really quiet, with our two-step, his walking stick, he would shuffle leaves as he went. And he, fully believed that broke up the sound to make it sound not at all like a human walking. And he attributed some of his success to that. I know Carl really, really well. I have no doubt there is something to that, partly because of his belief in it, which, it's kind of like fishing your favorite fishing lure. Yeah. You tend to fish that one a little harder. You catch more fish. He believed in that, but partly because of the science behind it and what he knew from the research, he never sounded like a human walking. So because of it, he walked up on a lot of deer that, I probably would have spooked way before I got close enough to shoot. So I think that's pretty cool. No peer-reviewed science behind that, to statistically say yes or no, but a lot of dead deer, in his freezer over the years attributed specifically to that little hunting technique.
Super cool.
Well, dude, I love that. It's funny. I don't carry a walking stick, but I'll walk and stop a ton. Just kind of shuffle my feet, scratch a little bit, walk, stop, and like even when you started hunting this year, like I think you do see a lot of people that just kind of have that pedestrian, just kind of, and that's just when it comes to the hunting woods, like that's just not normal. Yeah, that's the way I was taught. My grandpa just taught me to walk and stop and leave 10, 15 minutes earlier just so you can walk a little bit slower. Right. Try to really, really, really walk quiet. Like just don't sound like a person. If you come up on a deer, what does a deer do? Well, it stomps its foot. Yeah. Stomp your foot. You know what I mean? Like, sound like a deer. Like just don't sound like a person. I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. That's really, really cool.
Yeah,
That's
there's
really
just
interesting
not
stuff.
hunters. Just in many cases, just aren't disciplined enough to hunt like that. The whole time they may start slow, and 20 minutes in or 40 minutes or whatever. Just the way our lives are. We're just built to go faster, and hunters start losing focus, and suddenly they're not as quiet. They're not shuffling as much. They're sounding a lot more like humans.
Yep.
So, anyway, I
Well,
think there's
not
a
only
lot
that,
to
it's always like the walk in, the walk out. It's really easy to do that on the walk in when you're all jazzed up and ready to go. But then when it's at the end of the night and it's 15 degrees and windy and you're cold and you're ready to get
home.
and you're ready to get back. And dude, I don't mind the dark. It doesn't bother me one bit. Like my wife and people are like, I just can't believe you can just walk out there in the pitch dark. I'm like, I guess if there's nothing in Iowa, I don't think that's going to get me. And I guess something did, like, I guess that'd be a cool way to go. But I got a couple buddies that are definitely afraid of the dark.
Yeah.
And come towards dark, like you always know, because they are hightailing it back. They just don't like the dark. You know what I mean? So I always, if that's the case, I might just sacrifice the day so I can maybe scare them on the way back. Because I think that's always fun too.
Yeah.
But yeah, some people just don't like the dark. But it's hard to be disciplined in those types of ways.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Kip,
Growing up, my dad used to always tell me, like, there's no reason to be afraid of the dark. And my dad was a man's man. Really. So he'd always say, there's no reason to be afraid of the dark. And I can remember thinking as a little kid, like, well, if I was as big and as tough as you, I wouldn't be either. And my cousin, who was older than me, who would always hear this, and I looked up to him, as soon as my dad would say that and leave, my cousin would say, he's right. There's nothing. Because dad would say, there's nothing there at night that's not there during the day.
Yep.
There's nothing there.
That's exactly right.
And then once he left, my cousin would always say, yeah, but you can't see him at night. That's when they'll get you. So as a little kid that, I would almost be okay. So now I'm the same with you. I'm not afraid of the dark. And actually, I enjoy walking after dark. It's not entirely true there's not things there. There's a lot of stuff that comes out at night, like cool stuff, owls and all kinds of other things, that you don't get to hear or see during the day. So, oftentimes at the end of a hunt, I'm ready to get back to camp or ready to get back home as well. So I totally understand that. But man, I enjoy being in the woods before light and after dark. I think it's a cool experience.
Yeah, it's funny. When I used to guide in Southern Colorado, and the guy that I worked for, he jokingly always said, here's the thing is that when you're guiding, he's like, you're never lost and you're never scared.
Yeah.
He goes, you're never lost, you're never scared. And I'm like, but don't you get scared? Oh yeah, you get scared, but you don't tell the client you're scared. You're never scared.
Yeah.
And it's like, I guess there's a lot of truth in that. And there has been times where I'm like, man, I am lost. You know where we are? Yep. Oh yeah, totally know. We just got to go this way. Just got to get over this hill so I can see where we are here. And you just don't know where the heck you are.
Yeah.
But Kip, one of the other things I wanted to mention to you, this has nothing to do with anything, but we actually talked about this on the podcast. It was last year sometime.
Last summer, I think.
Yeah. It was something that, so my background, I'm 39, started shooting a bow and arrow when I was like a teenager, and then shot a compound for a couple years. Then I just went gung ho about traditional bow hunting, and I shot a recurve bow for a long time. And, my wife and I, we got 5 kids now, so a little bit less time make less time to shoot. So I shoot a compound again now, but, when I shot my recurve bow, I really, really, felt like I needed to get every advantage I could get, and so I did a lot of research way, way back about shot placement. And I just somewhere along the way, and like, not just like shot placement, like reading about stuff from like recently, like reading stuff from Fred Bear and Howard Hill and how they did things. And one of the things that I really gravitated towards was shoot them in the heart. If you shoot them in the heart, you touch their heart, they're going to die. Right? Yeah. Just touch their heart. Just have the tip of your arrow touch their heart. And we actually talked about, which was funny because when I was, we knew we were going to have you on, I was cyber stalking you, and I'm like, hey, that's the guy. And you did a video, I think, for Whitetail Properties where you had, a foam target and where you could pull you could pull an arrow shaft or a shaft through and see, and you talk about having the arrow touch the heart. Where's the heart at? Yeah. And that has been one thing that, and again, I wasn't a very successful traditional bow hunter. Honestly, a lot of my buddies called me a nature watcher because I just went out there and just, okay, hi, 40 yards, see you later, and just watch them walk by because it's too far. But that was one of the things that really, really has helped me, and it's helped me especially shooting a compound too, is just whenever deer walks in, I'm always thinking, where is their heart? Where is their shoulder? Where's their heart? And if I can focus on that in any angle, and obviously a broadside quartering away, because obviously you can get at their heart so good in those positions. That's just something I really, really love that video. When I saw that, that really struck me.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty awesome. I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about enough, right? They just have a deer kind of walk in. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to shoot a deer.
Yeah.
And they just see the deer. They don't think, where's the heart? Because if you can touch their heart, man, it doesn't, I mean, great if you can get a toll pasture, but you don't even have to. Just have it touch the heart.
Yeah,
Touch the heart, it's dead deer.
Yeah.
You know, I love that.
Yeah.
Good deal. I'm glad you like that. I was pretty proud of that video, and that was, and Whitetail Properties does phenomenal camera work and videos.
Yep.
That was the first video they ever had that had over 1 million views. And,
Yes.
Wow.
I like that from a hunter's end thing. You know what? That means there's enough hunters out there that care enough to learn where those organs are, and to be better from a shot placement end. So I thought that spoke very highly on, behalf of hunters. And so I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Definitely.
One thing, maybe you've seen this, maybe you haven't. I actually talked about it on that podcast when we were talking about shooting them in the heart. Is there's an organization called the Bowhunter Education Association, I think it's called. Bowhunter Education Association. They have these books that you can buy that are laminated pictures, images. And I actually saw it first when I was guiding in Colorado. We had an elk one, and you can buy them on their website. And basically what it is that I literally have it in my truck, because I keep it in my truck all the time. I have it in a binder that I keep in my glove box. But basically what you do is the first image is just of an elk. And all the time with clients, they'd come back, oh, I shot an elk. All right, man, point me where the arrow go. Where was the entrance? And they would point. Well, then you could flip to the next sheet, and it exposed the bones. Then you flip to the next sheet, and then it was their circulatory system. Then you flip to the next sheet, then it was their vital organs. Flip to the next sheet, it was all the rest. Flip to the next sheet, and you could go through the sheets. They have one for elk, whitetail, turkey, black bear. I love them.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen those. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that's the National Bowhunter Education Foundation.
There you go.
Yep.
There you go.
And actually, they're the ones that made that target that I had.
Okay.
Anatomically correct target. That's from the National Bowhunter Education Foundation.
Man,
so
I
they're the
love
ones
that.
that produced that as well. Yeah, they make great stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's like, and like there's some stuff out there, some digital stuff out there now, like the Deercast app.
Yep.
They have a deer that you can point the arrow and you can kind of turn it, I think, in different angles and stuff. But yeah, I love that. I mean, it's funny, even to this day, every spring turkey hunting, I love archery hunting turkeys. And I'm looking at those shot placement images because it's just nice to stay on top of that stuff.
without a doubt.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, but that's awesome.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, Kip, I really, really appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you a ton. Like you said, day to day, me and Nick are pretty much just a couple hillbilly rednecks. So we appreciate debunking and making sure that we're saying things the right way. I really, really appreciate it, man. Thanks a ton.
Absolutely, my pleasure. It was fun talking with you, and you guys clearly have done your research with that and understand things from a hunting end. So that always makes it more fun for me to talk to folks like that as well. So I had a good time here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thanks, Kip.
Thank you.
All right, guys, another podcast in the books. Thanks for watching. It was Honest Killerwinds podcast. See you next week. Thanks again, Kip.